Friends, we are aware that requirements engineering and management is the key activity of an IT business analyst. In this lecture, we will cover the overview of requirements engineering and management, or what we call as the requirements process. The agenda of this session is twofold. We will have the overview of the requirements engineering and management process, and also we will cover QBI Institute's requirements engineering and management framework. Before I start with the overview of requirements engineering and management, I am tempted to share with you a small secret about IT industry. This is what I call as requirement malaise. And requirements malaise has been very briefly and very succinctly covered by my friend and my advisor Dr. Robin Goldsmith in his book Real Requirements. I quote, "You folks start coding, I will go and find out what requirements are." So you see, this looks very counterintuitive that on projects there is a set of developers who start coding even before the requirements are finalized. What we have learned in software development lifecycle, that there is an analysis phase where we finalize the requirements, and then development team starts with the development phase. But sometimes what happens, we do not give adequate time during the analysis phase, or maybe we are a little bit relaxed during the analysis phase, and then even before getting into the depth of requirements, development starts happening. So this is what we can call as one weakness on some of the projects. This has to be avoided at all costs, and this can be avoided when we give adequate focus to the requirements process and when we give utmost importance to the analysis phase or the requirements analysis phase on an IT project. I have been using this word requirements engineering or requirements process with the business analysts or prospective participants of the business analysis course for quite a while. Now it is time to formally explain what requirements engineering is all about. Requirements engineering is a branch of computer science that encompasses tasks that go into determining the requirements of new or altered system. So, requirements engineering is now recognized as a formal branch of computer science, and it is all about the task or the process through which we decipher, we elicit, or we uncover the requirements of a new system which we are developing or the system which is under alteration. Requirements engineering and management is the key activity and the essential activity of an IT business analyst working on an IT project. In fact, if the requirements are not set right, the project is doomed to fail. The effectiveness of requirements engineering process is closely connected with the outcome of IT projects. Here, I will share with you 3 news reports which prove the connection between the requirements process and the outcome of the IT project. CIO magazine reports, and I quote, "Analysts report that as many as 71% of software projects that fail do so because of poor requirements management, making it the single biggest reason for project failure, bigger than bad technology, missed deadlines, or change management fiascos." Standish report, the Standish Chaos report, which surveyed 9,236 IT projects, found that the top 3 causes for project failure were lack of user input, incomplete requirements, and changing requirements. Survey of European software organizations has shared the following outcome. A recent survey of European software organizations identified that more than 40% perceived that they had major problems in managing customer requirements. and more than 50% perceived that they had major problem in the area of requirements specification. So here, friends, if you see, all these three reports focus or they narrow down upon one word or one process, that is requirement. So, in a nutshell, if we do not set our requirements process right, or if we do not effectively carry out the requirements process, there are going to be major problems in your IT project. That is a very clear correlation. We know it by our experience, and here this is data which also proves and justifies the same. What is a requirement? All of us have got a certain idea of what we mean by requirement when it comes to software systems. It is expected capability from a software system in terms of process functionality or a non-functional requirement. So, to take an example of process functionality, say for a banking software, process functionality can be the ability to initiate fund transfer by the account holder of a bank electronically. A non-functional requirement is something like, say, availability of the system. So the system shall be available 99.99% of the total time. What is requirements engineering and management? It is a structured process to elicit, uncover, analyze, document, validate, and manage requirements. A very common question comes up, and that is, how much resources shall we allocate to the requirements process? So, as a rule of thumb, approximately 14 to 18% of total project resources are allocated to the requirements process. So, it means if you have a 10-month project, kindly allocate something like 1.5 or 1.8 months to the requirements phase. Is there any standard process for requirements engineering and management? You see, there isn't any standard process. Companies tailor this process according to their own requirements and according to the product which is under consideration. But the components like requirements elicitation, requirements analysis, requirements documentation, requirements validation, requirements management are always there. So these components are there. There can be different amount of emphasis depending upon the project under consideration. So say for example, if we are making a software which is to be embedded, let us say, in an aircraft, the requirements process will be very stringent compared to some software, let us say, which is only online event registration system. Now, after having some idea about the requirements engineering and management process and the importance of requirements process, let us discuss the QBI Institute's Requirements Engineering and Management Framework. The QBI Institute's Requirements Engineering and Management Framework has got 5 essential steps. Number 1, formulation and elicitation. Number 2, analysis. Number 3, documentation. Number 4, validation. And number 5, management. So, to repeat again, these are the 5 essential steps or 5 essential ingredients of the requirements process. Any business analyst who is part of the requirements process will have to take up these activities. Though I have given them numbers or sequential order, we must understand here that these activities are one after another and sometimes they also happen simultaneously. This means that while I formulate and elicit requirements, or while I capture and gather, collect and ask for requirements from the client, I can even simultaneously analyze them. You can't stop your mind to do analysis. While you do, say for example, analysis or while you do documentation, then and there you can also validate them. But there is one important thing, that for each of these steps you have to give separate time and you have to give undivided attention while you do that. This means that, say for example, you can't do requirements validation activity alongside requirements documentation activity. Once the documentation is complete, you have to give a separate and a pure time to validate your requirements as a business analyst on the project. This is what I mean by one after another and simultaneous. Let us now understand the objectives of the QBI Institute's Requirements Engineering Framework. First objective is uncover essential requirements at an early stage. As a business analyst, remember this objective. There are certain essential requirements which are the essence or which are the, soul of the project. And these are the requirements for which the project has come into being. So you have to uncover them as early as possible. Capture clients' stated and unstated requirements. You see, as a business analyst on the project, you are an expert. That is what you are getting paid for. The client will share his requirements about the project in a formal manner, but he may not be able to articulate or he may not be able to express all the requirements. So here you need to capture even the unstated requirements of the client, which are what you can say essential requirements for the success of the project. So here you apply your experience, here you apply your mind, and here you reconfirm with the client that this should also go into the project. Define in scope and out of scope boundaries. As a business analyst, your prime task is requirements. What requirements are within the scope of the project? But sometimes there is a gray line between the in scope and out of scope requirements. So you must also mention what is out of scope for the project, what requirements the project is not going to cater to. Then another very important objective of the QBI Institute framework, which has become now very relevant in the time where products are being deployed globally and in the times of the SaaS models, that is analyze requirements across time, geography and organization structures. So you see, requirements are never static. Requirements are dynamic. They change with time. So you must not only capture requirements of today, but also capture some of the requirements of near future, so that you don't have to change or alter the project time and again. And your design should also be able to support these requirements. Then requirements across geography. So say for example, one of the simple requirements across geography are say multi-currency support, or say multi-language support, or say provision for different time zones. Then across organization structures. So that means if the organization is growing rapidly, if the organization is growing into departments, into business units, then your software should be able to support it without changing the underlying code time and again. Then another objective is manage changing requirements effectively. So we must understand that requirements change and we must be ready for that kind of change upfront right at the start of the project. This means there must be a change control procedure on the project, and our design and our intent should be to welcome when change comes to us. Design and deploy solutions and technologies in alignment with project requirements. So you see, the choice of technology, the design of the solution is dependent upon your immediate requirements, or near-term requirements, middle-term and long-term requirements. So solution design and choice of technology should be like that only. And I'll share with you that each of these objectives, as we go along, we will be discussing them with examples and in great detail. So now we come to the first step of the requirements process, that is requirements formulation and elicitation. Many a times I am asked by new business analysts on the task that how do we start the project? How do we open the project, or how do we initiate the requirements process? You see, that is where the word formulation comes into picture. Even before you initiate the dialogue with your client, I suggest that you do some background preparation, you do some requirements formulation. How do we do that? We formulate requirements on the basis of the project title, the vision of the project, the mission document of the project. So the documents which are already there for the project, which have been written down by the client or maybe in coordination with the development team, so you go through them. You go through the earlier client interaction. It will be easy for you if you have been the part of this team. But if not, you just go through the earlier client interaction, earlier documents. You study documents like request for proposal, contract, the advertisement which has been taken out by the client. You see, all these documents and all this correspondence, all these proceedings will help you uncover the soul of the project, the essential requirements. You will also become something like a well-prepared professional to initiate the dialogue with the client. Here, you see, while you formulate the requirement, your prior experience also helps you out. So you are not a novice, you know what the requirements of your domain are, whatever it may be. Then, as a business analyst expert who is on a second project or third project, you formulate requirements on the basis of domain-specific business rules and domain-specific requirements. So after you prepare this formulation, or after you do this background work, you are now ready to initiate the dialogue with the client, and there comes the stage for requirements elicitation. After having got some idea about the requirements of the project and about the scope of the project, now you are ready to formally engage your client and other stakeholders. So this stage is known as requirements elicitation stage. Elicitation is the process to draw the response in a formal manner. So formally you engage your client, and while you elicit your requirements, first you have to identify the stakeholders, those individuals who are affected by the outcome of the project and those individuals who can share the requirements with you. You also have to identify the departments where the key requirement can be taken out from, and you deploy formal elicitation techniques like interviews, surveys, questionnaires, joint requirement sessions, observations, etc. We will be learning about these elicitation techniques in the requirements elicitation section. After you are done with the requirements elicitation stage, you need to analyze these requirements. Why do we need to analyze them or examine them in detail? There are several reasons. One of them is that various set of stakeholders can have conflicting requirements. We may need to prioritize requirements and their delivery, more so when the project is long. Business process steps to be followed and their implications. You see, if we design a business process in a different manner, the user interface also changes and some things like that. Classify requirements as per project module, client department, stakeholder type, etc. So while you analyze, you classify the requirements. You identify or differentiate between in-scope and out-of-scope requirements. Establish at the preliminary level linkage between requirements and design. You see, as an analyst, your first task is to compile the business requirements, functional requirements and non-functional requirements. But as you gather experience, you see the design is dictated by the kind of requirements. So, though the design is the responsibility of the architect, as an analyst, you also are able to establish at the preliminary level the linkage between requirements and design. It is during the requirements analysis stage that you also identify business requirements and business rules. You identify environmental requirements. You classify between negotiable and non-negotiable requirements. You finalize the data and digitization requirements of the project. Functional and non-functional requirements are identified. And also, we are able to prepare what is known as the requirements database or the requirements catalog. So, this is the single repository for the full requirements of the project, and individual requirements which reside in this database will have various attributes like requirements ID, requirements source, the date of fulfillment of the requirement, the type of requirement, whether it is a functional requirement or a non-functional requirement, and many more attributes. Whatever you have elicited and analyzed so far has to be documented in a structured manner in form of formal documents which can later be shared with the client for validation and post-validation shared with the development team for construction or development of the project. So here are the example of some of the documents which you need to prepare. They are vision document, project title and scope document, business requirements document, software requirement specification document, user requirement analysis. There can be, in addition to these documents, several checklists, site manuals which you may have to prepare. Post elicitation, analysis and preparation of formal documents comes the validation stage. 3 questions are to be answered here. Why at all shall we validate? What should we validate? And how to do the validation? You see, to answer the first question, why validate, is simple. There can be errors of omission and commission during the communication between the business analyst and other stakeholders, especially the client. What to validate? You see, not only we validate formal documents like a business requirement document or a software requirement specification document, we can also do the validation of minutes of meeting or maybe some interviews by sharing a process model or by sharing the understanding of that meeting. And how do we validate? You see, in this era of information technology, there are so many mechanisms to validate. In fact, even a phone call can be used for validation. However, there is one check which you must ensure, that validation at this stage is an absolutely formal process. So you have to formally validate. That means a client has to put his signature and seal on the requirements document which you have prepared. If he is stated or seated far away, then he can put a digital signature or he can give his confirmation on email. The formally validated requirements document is shared with the development team who now starts developing or constructing the project. However, requirements are not static by their very nature. Even if we have a validated requirements document, it is not cast in stone. So requirements change, and even before we start the project, we need to formulate a mechanism on how we are going to handle these changing requirements. So there are standard requirement management procedures like a problem report form or a issue escalation form. Here, as a business analyst, you also need to appreciate that requirements management or changing requirements between the project or after the project is both art and science. Whatever rules you may decide at the start, they may change. In this session, we have learned that various stages of the requirements process, that is formulation and elicitation, analysis, documentation, validation and management are both sequential and simultaneous. The requirements engineering process is critical to IT project success or failure. In the coming section, we will learn various types of requirements, that is functional and non-functional requirements, business requirements, stakeholder requirements, transition requirements, etc.